Alright, here we go again. Infowars.com. This is an article titled Driver's Licenses for the Internet, a Rebuttal. And it says, I read an article today. It was published in Time magazine, written by Barbara Caveat, and entitled Driver's Licenses for the Internet. The fear-mongering in this article was unabashed. At the very first sentence, stated that even just discussing the current state of the Internet security was, quote, scary, with a hyphenated Y. This fear-mongering continues until the fifth paragraph, where the solution is proposed. Internet licenses. Fear-mongering aside, the arguments for this solution were weak. Caveat states that a major obstacle to implementing the licenses would be public outcry against the loss of online anonymity. I can never pronounce that word, but her response is that in the real world, your anonymity is only allowed in public. However, if you were to say, walk into the bank vault, you would need to present an ID. Well, the equivalent of that structure is already in place on the internet, so I fail to see what the issue is. I cannot enter into anyone's bank account but my own, and even then it is required that I register my online account with the company, and I am granted access each time I log in. If someone were to gain access to the online equivalent of the bank, quote, vault, they would certainly need to present credentials that most of us do not have. And it goes on to say, Caveat's second argument is that the license or licenses would prevent scammers from collecting donations for fake charities, as they would have to present their true identity in order to set up such a site. And it says, personally, I am no more likely to give my money to a non-reputable charity that I know nothing about online than I am to some random guy on the street corner with a bucket and a sign. Does that mean that some overly trusting people wouldn't fall for the scam? No, of course not, but scammers can be prosecuted scammers can be prosecuted online or off, just like someone stealing from a bank would be criminally charged whether they hacked in or walked in off the street and held the place up. Caveat goes on to mention that identity theft only in the fear-mongering portions of her article. She does not explain how the licensing system would prevent identity theft, perhaps because it would be, in fact, make it easier for criminals to accomplish. Common sense tells us that if all of our online interactions are consolidated under one license, one only needs to gain access to that license in order to learn everything about you and to act as though they were you under false pretenses. Blackmailing. Seeing as cyber criminals to date have managed to outsmart security protocols time and time again, why should we believe that this licensing system would not be vulnerable? The fact is, right now, you do not have to put your information online. You can elect to provide your personal information to certain companies for the sake of convenience, but you still reserve the right to keep any and all information about your identity offline. If these licenses are put into place, will you still be allowed that right? Or will you be required to provide your personal information in exchange for, quote, privilege of accessing the internet? Finally, there is a notable absence in this article of one of the most important aspects of online access, freedom of expression. Caveat says that it is fine if you want to read Time magazine articles without identifying yourself, but says nothing about what would be required if you should want to respond to an article or dispute the claims made. Will you have to present your license first? Click a user-friendly button that identifies who you are, where you live, what bank you use, what purchases you've made, and what activity you've conducted on other websites? Who will you be sending this information to? And what criteria will be used to determine whether or not you are allowed the privilege of expression? And it says there already have been talk of requiring journalistic licenses or certifications to prevent bloggers from having the ability to talk about news and world events from their own editorial perspective or presenting their own research online. I would argue against such a requirement, as it is a more intelligent society that leaves it up to the discretion of the reader to determine whether or not the information presented is credible, regardless of the source. We should not have to be told who to listen to and who to not listen to, without having to do any critical thinking or research of your own. And of course, this right here would pertain to someone like me, right? Because I'm sitting here and that's all I do. I just cover article after article after article, and some of it is is very credible, and some of it, well, most news is does have a bias in it, but that's kind of irrelevant. That's not what I'm trying to get at here. What I'm saying is that I cover a lot of articles that are mainstream articles, and then I just tear them apart, right? To try to it's basically I just post these articles because I want to show people and keep connecting the dots and keep building this bigger picture so that people can see what it is these quote conspiracy theorists are really talking about, right? Because if we just go on and on and on without showing you articles, well, then you'll just think we're a bunch of kooks and nuts, and I would too, because if you're not based in, if you don't have facts, right? If you don't have the facts to back it up, you're not really based in reality anymore. And so, what I like to do is I like to take our enemies' um, information. I'm not saying Infowars. Infowars obviously is an ally, but I'm saying, you get Reuters and New York Times and Bloomberg and all those, and the bankers basically and their propaganda, and we like to cut it apart and show to you what is crap and what is not. And obviously, we're not trying to think for you, or we're not trying to tell you what to think. We're proposing our perception of reality based off the facts that we show and put together. Now, obviously, I wouldn't expect you to believe everything I said. I would hope that you would go and research what I'm saying is right. That's why I post links. I want you to go and actually read the article, and then I want you to get interested in it and then start looking at other information. So, this whole thing about the journalist, and when I was in school, when I was going to college, before I earned my degree in journalism and news writing, they talked about blogging, and that was, some of the we had, you would have to have debates about whether blogging was journalism, and I don't think it really matters. I don't, it's not. Why are we arguing or debating whether blogging is journalism? I mean, yes, there's some good journalists out there who do what they're supposed to do, and that is what you're kind of like a public servant. You're an investigator. You're like an investigator, right? A police investigator for the public, and you're supposed to be just You're supposed to be presenting this information and allowing them to make up their own mind. I never claim that what I'm doing is straight up, investigative reporting, right? And I don't have to, and that's the beauty of it. That's the freedom that we have. Is that I can talk about this stuff and I can give you what I believe, because I'm not claiming to, that this is, cutting edge reporting here. Although, what I am doing is somewhat reporting, because, a lot of people will never know about any of this stuff unless it gets unless it gets carried, unless it gets reported, unless it gets uploaded into YouTube, and you'll see it. So, I kind of went on to a rant with the whole blogging and journalism portion, but I finished up right here. So I would hope that you just go and read this rest of this article to yourself and make up your own mind about this whole thing. But I've been seeing more and more about the internet coming under fire, which is, of course, our First Amendment right, which is free speech. And you can check out other videos. There's many of them on net neutrality and how the establishment is coming for our First Amendment and our Second Amendment. But you see, those are the two biggest elements that are required in a free republic, right? And if we don't have those, then we don't have a republic anymore. We just have basically some form of a dictatorship with straight up tyranny. And so, and then of course, what is the sign of that is when the government fears the public, that's liberty. But when the public fears the government, that's tyranny. And right now. We're just kind of tiptoeing into that tyranny where the majority of the public does fear the government. And me myself, I will say that the government has been hijacked, and it's not the government that I know. It has been hijacked by offshore bankers. And I mean, I don't fear it, but I gotta say, look out. Look